Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Joe Jordan, who has been writing about motion pictures for several years. He is the author of Showmanship, the Cinema of William Castle, and Robert Wise, the Motion Pictures, which he discussed on this show a couple of years ago. And he's got a new book out now on Billy Wilder himself, Magic Time, the films and scripts of Billy Wilder, which is a wonderful book. Joe, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Robert, it's great to be back on the show. I believe it's been almost 2 years, so thanks for having me back.
No, my pleasure. It's hard to believe because I had someone else on recently, and it was about a year and a half, and it feels like yesterday. Yes. All the time.
Yes,
all the time. But it's great to have you back, and I really enjoyed the book. I love Wilder. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, certainly, and I learned so much. So I'm excited to ask a lot of questions for you today. So the first thing I wanted to ask was what was do you remember the first Wilder film you saw?
So the first Billy Wilder film that I saw was The Front Page, one of his later films, which, as many people know, was a remake of His Girl Friday, and also the 1931 film The Front Page. So the reason why I was attracted to that film was because a professor of mine in college had shown it to another class. I had missed out on that class, but I heard other people talking about it, and so I was intrigued, and I saw it. That became the first Billy Wilder film that I ever saw, which I became inspired to write the book, partly film. So in 1999, I worked as a clerk for an attorney in Beverly Hills, and it was a short-term gig. I was working for him for about, I want to say, 6 months. And on the last day of my employment, he took me out to lunch just to extend his thanks for, everything I had done during that six-month period. So during our lunch, we talked about Billy Wilder, pretty much the entire lunch, which is funny because just down the street, only a couple of blocks away, was Mr. Wilder's office. Again, this was 1999, and Billy Wilder had an office just down the street in Beverly Hills. It was at a time when Cameron Crowe's book, Conversations with Wilder, would soon be published. And so, those who have read Conversations with Wilder, I think they would understand, exactly how difficult it was for even Cameron Crowe, this A-list director, to arrange a meeting with Billy Wilder. But eventually he did, and he got some great interviews out of it. So shortly following my lunch with the attorney, I concluded my day of employment, my last day of employment with him, drove back to my apartment, which was in Westwood, and I was reflecting back on the conversation that the two of us had. Billy Wilder had so many credits to his name. Not far from where I lived in Westwood, there was a video store called Vidiots. It's out of business now, but located in Santa Monica, they carried hundreds and hundreds of VHS tapes of classic films. So I made the short drive to Santa Monica, where Vidiots was located, like I said, and I found almost every Wilder film available in the store. So I faced the decision, which film do I rent first? And I decided on 1974's The Front Page because, what I had mentioned before about former college professor of mine enjoying it and showing it to his class. So I'm back in my apartment in Westwood. I put the tape into the VCR and I started, and the opening credits are rolling. And one name that immediately caught my attention was that of Austin Pendleton. Now, only a year earlier, I was in New York, and I had seen Austin Pendleton perform at the Music Box Theater on Broadway, and the production was The Diary of Anne Frank, which starred Natalie Portman and George Hearn. And Austin Pendleton played a supporting character. He was great. He was outstanding in the role. I never forgot his performance. So as I was watching The Front Page back in 1999, I said, oh, hey, there's Austin Pendleton. So fast forward to 24 years later, my Billy Wilder manuscript had recently been completed, and I wanted someone who knew and worked with Wilder to pen the foreword. So, on a whim, I reached out to Austin Pendleton, and he immediately agreed to contribute his memories. So together, he and I discussed what the forward should contain. It was like a dream come true, and I got to tell him all about his work in the theater and that I was able to see him perform on Broadway. Not to mention the fact that he provided the voice of Gurgle, Finding Nemo, when my two children were growing up. Finding Nemo was one of their favorite films, and the Wilder book is actually dedicated to both of my children. And so the fact that Austin Pendleton wrote the foreword of this book, there's that connection too, that Finding Nemo connection, which was really amazing. So, not long after the book was published, I suddenly remembered my conversation that I had with the attorney back in 1999. And I got to thinking how much the discussion that the two of us had that day when we had lunch, how much it inspired my book. And so, through the years, we didn't keep in touch. I had moved away from Southern California. But I decided to look him up and inform him of the news. And, I was really excited to share this news with him. Come to find out, he actually passed away in 2016. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to tell him, but, I'm always going to be grateful for the support that he had on my life. I'm never going to forget the lunch that we had that day in Beverly Hills. So,
Wow, what an inspiring story that got you going on your Billy Wilder journey. There's a number of books on Wilder's films. What were you trying to do different with this book?
So my book presents a film by film analysis of Billy Wilder's filmography. And not only do I include every picture he directed, but most of the scripts he wrote as well.
Mm,
The biographical details are limited, just like with my Robert Wise book and my William Castle book. The
right.
biographical details are limited. My concern is the films and scripts. For those looking to read a biography of Wilder, they should purchase a copy of, it's called On Sunset Boulevard, The Life and Times of Billy Wilder, written by Ed Sykov. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. I believe it's Ed
Right.
Sykov. But of course, Cameron Crowe's Conversations with Wilder, that's also amazing as well. So with my book, I wanted to do something different than my previous two books. So, like Wilder, so many books have been written about the great Alfred Hitchcock. And I was, looking at the different books that were available pertaining to the career of Alfred Hitchcock. And there's a book called Hitchcock's Motifs. So it's an entire book, and it's dedicated only to the motifs. So, as I was writing my Wilder book, I decided to create a special section at the end entitled 101 Motifs, Catchphrases, and More from A to Z. So that way I could not only touch upon the films, the scripts, but also the motifs and some of those things that you see in the films of
Mm.
Billy Wilder.
Yeah, I really liked that whole section, and that must have been quite the journey to have picked apart all of those
Yeah.
motifs that you came away with, and that was really really fascinating to read at the back of the book. One thing I never knew this about Wilder's movies, that a lot of them are adapted from plays.
Yes.
Uh, did you wouldn't happen to know? Did he actively look for material in the theater, or did it kind of come from all different? I know his ideas came from different areas and places and stuff, different inspirations. But I don't know if you would happen to know.
So he did attend the theater. One play that comes to mind is Stalag 17. The
Oh
play
yeah,
was written by Donald Bevan and Edmund Trzynski. Donald Bevan's wife, Pat Kirkland, she was an actress, but what she really wanted to do was she wanted to become a casting director. She was so interested in the casting side of show business, and so she attended many plays, partly because she was in search of up and coming talent. So one evening in New York, Donald Bevan and Pat Kirkland attended a performance of The King and I at the St. James Theater. Prior to the show, their they're backstage with the great Yul Brynner. They had a great conversation. The subject of the conversation was Billy Wilder, just because she knew, Pat Kirkland knew how much Billy Wilder enjoyed Stalag 17. He had seen it, on more than one occasion. And so the rest is history. Now, Billy Wilder, of course, was mostly in Southern California, but when the opportunity presented itself, he would attend a Broadway show now and then. Yeah.
You wouldn't happen to know, because I'm intrigued. Like even Some Like It Hot, I didn't know came from. I believe that was a French play, right?
Yeah. So, well, actually, it was a film.
Sorry, a film. Yeah.
Yes, Fanfare d'Amour, which translates as Fanfare of Love. Yes.
Right. And now I imagine because Wilder, whether he was working with Brackett or I.A.L. Diamond in the second half of his career, I suppose you could look at it that way. They have those films have such a signature, very, you look at those films, you know that this is Wilder. I would imagine a lot of these plays were not just straight adaptations and they, changed it a little bit. I imagine they changed a lot of it. I don't know if you would have. Yeah, I figured. Yeah,
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah.
Did you happen to read any of the plays in your research?
I did. I did. And one of the things that, during my research, I spent a lot of time reading the plays first, and
Okay.
then I would watch the film
Hmm.
because the argument that I would make in my book, sometimes it would be like a compare and contrast of the play. Did Billy Wilder make the play better? Was perhaps the original source better? But yes, I think out of all the plays that I read, perhaps the one I enjoyed the most was The 7 Year Itch. So,
Right. Right. Yeah, I kind of had a hunch um, that's how they went about it. I didn't think he was someone who sort of adapted it very, very close to the plays. But that's interesting. I'll have to read some of the plays that they were adapted. I really like the interviews in the book. So we have an interview with Martha Keller, who was in Fedora,
right.
Lisa Linsky, who was in The Fortune Cookie, I believe,
Yes,
and Ronnie Sperling, who was in Buddy Buddy, one of his
correct.
last films. Did
Yeah.
you did you do those interviews, or how did you, or did where did you, or how did you get them?
So I did. The very
Okay.
first person, yeah. So I reached out to agents and managers. That was the best way for me to get in touch with people. So the very first person I interviewed for the book was in fact Lisa Linsky.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and
And
like
she's
you,
a kid. She's one of the kids in Fortune Cookie, right? I
yes,
believe. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, she plays Ginger Gingrich, the daughter of Willie Gingrich, Walter Matthau's character. Yes,
Right.
yes.
Right.
He was great. I also interviewed Charlie Mathau. He was able to provide some great information.
Wow.
Ruta Lee. I don't know if you've seen Witness for the Prosecution, but
Oh
Ruta
yes.
Lee.
Yes.
Okay, her supporting character is outstanding. Her and we had a great conversation regarding her time on the set of that film. Probably the best interview, not including Austin Pendleton, was the one I conducted with Ronnie Sperling. He appeared as the hippie husband, like you said, and
Such a good interview. I love
yeah.
those stories.
Yes, yes. So he was, so enthusiastic, so helpful, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. The stories were fantastic.
Yeah.
It was a shame that Martha Keller didn't speak too highly of the way in which he directed. Not that that was everyone's experience, because I believe a number of actors really liked working with him. That
Yes.
he was really good with actors, but
Yes.
it just happens that they did not quite mesh. Is that the best way to put it?
Yes. So what it comes down to, and when Austin Pendleton and I were working on the foreword of the book together, one of the words or adjectives that he used to describe Billy Wilder is tough as nails. And
Hmm.
the way I took it was like you have to be able to roll with those punches. Some people can, perhaps some people maybe not so much. Um, just because Billy Wilder demanded a lot from his performers, and if you take a
Right.
look at the end result on film, you can understand why. So
Hmm. Yeah. I again, it's even though it wasn't the happiest of in creative collaborations, it's still a really really good interview. And speaking of Fedora, I'd never seen it before. This is the one great thing about this book, because I've seen a lot of Wilder's films, but a lot of them I also hadn't seen. A lot of the stuff post The Apartment I hadn't seen, and even a couple from before, maybe even more than a couple. And that movie, I never even heard of it, Fedora. And as you said in the book, what a great double feature with Sunset Boulevard. It even felt like it was right in a good way, even though it's made in the 80s. It felt like it was right out of the 50s. And just everything that this woman the extent that she'll go to stay young, to keep her stardom alive. I mean, just like Wilder, it captures that blend of drama and comedy, and if not, and in this case, even tragedy. I thought that was such a wonderful film that I'm surprised I don't hear people talking about it too much. How do you feel about that one?
I think it's a great film. You can tell that a lot of hard work and effort was put into it. But yes, I think the critics were not particularly kind upon its release in
So
1978.
strange.
Yeah.
So sorry, 78. I'm thinking it was 80s. Yeah, I'm really surprised. I hope that's a film that scholars will give its fair due to, because to this day, rightfully so, we talk about Sunset Boulevard in great extent, and it is a masterpiece. And I'm not saying that Fedora is as good as Sunset Boulevard, but it is really good. I mean,
Mhm.
so hopefully we'll maybe I should do something about it, because I thought it was really very truthful and really holds up. For someone who doesn't know Wilder's movies
Yeah.
very well, and they pick up your book, I mean, this is in a good way. Any critical study of a filmmaker and like you said, these are not just some movies. You go through every single movie he directed, that he wrote. You have to know the films. I mean, it'd be very difficult to read, I would imagine. So where's the best place for people to start if they want to get into this book and start watching Wilder's movies, do you think?
So, it's a great question. When I made the decision to write the book, I was initially going to write only about Billy Wilder's directorial efforts, and the reason being is that the Castle book, the William Castle book, is specifically about his directorial efforts. Same with the Robert Wise book. But it's clear that Billy Wilder's early scripts are equally important. And so, as you mentioned, the first part of the book focuses on the screenplays. And I
Yeah.
think a good starting point, I think an outstanding script is NINOTCHKA. Uh,
Oh, that is brilliant. I just saw that last year
yeah,
for the first time. I was asked to review it on another show. I knew nothing about it, and man, blew me away.
yes, yes.
Brilliant.
I think that's a great starting point. If you're going to look at, the films that he wrote, the films that he did not direct but wrote. Um, in addition to Ninochka, some of the other films, key films to look at, and I'm going to mention the most popular ones. I think probably just there's Double Indemnity, there's Sunset Boulevard,
Yeah.
Witness for the Prosecution, Some Like It Hot, in The Apartment. Those are probably the top five of the directorial efforts Wilder put out there for the public to see. So.
Yeah, great choices. Did you talked about he had battles with the production code when in the 40s and the 50s and even in the 60s. He had his share of battles. His films really were uh you know what's the best well, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but he was exploring certain truths that I think people made people probably uncomfortable, and he had a number of battles. Do you know which films were the toughest with that he had with the production code?
So the first film that comes to mind would have to be Double Indemnity.
Ah,
So James M. Cain had written the novel. He had sold the rights to Paramount, and at that time, some had considered the novel to be controversial. So, in order to avoid trouble with the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA, revisions became necessary. So Wilder sought the assistance of Charles Brackett, but Brackett considered the novel to be too grim. So he decided to basically distance himself from the project. James M. Cain himself was unable to help because he was committed to another project. It was Universal's Gypsy Wildcat. So then
Right.
Wilder was introduced to Raymond Chandler, a novelist Raymond Chandler, and Raymond Chandler's expertise or forte, for lack of a better word, was constructive dialogue and detailed descriptions. So Chandler was not a fan of Kane's writing, and so he made some extensive revisions to the narrative upon joining the venture. The original novel. Have you read Double Indemnity? The novel Double
I
Indemnity.
haven't. I have
Okay.
not, but I plan to one day.
Is it okay if I wanted to make an example, but I don't want to reveal a spoiler if you plan to
Oh yeah,
read.
yeah. No, go ahead. Go. Yeah, I'm all
Okay.
spoilers here.
Okay. So the original novel features an ending during which Neff and Phyllis's characters, so Fred MacMurray, Barbara Stanwyck's characters, they commit suicide by jumping into shark-infested waters, and there's no way that the
Oh
production
wow.
code would have allowed that kind of ending. As time passed, Billy Wilder became one to essentially defy the censors, do whatever he pleased. But yeah, I think Double Indemnity was a challenge for him.
Well, it's a. I mean, he they came up with such a perfect ending that I think is even better than what I haven't read the book, but just
Yeah.
from the sounds of what you said, the ending is so good. And
Yeah.
one thing that an observation you made, which I thought was really interesting, was that you talked about the connection between there was a connection between Sunset Boulevard and Double Indemnity, and of course, those are two of his film noir movies. Can
Right.
you talk a little bit about what that connection is?
Sure, sure. So in Double Indemnity, when Walter Neff, the insurance salesman, Fred MacMurray's character, meets Phyllis Dietrichson, I was going to say Marlene Dietrich, whoops. Sorry, Barbara Stanwyck's character, she plays Phyllis Dietrichson. So when those two meet for the first time, it's unexpected. It is a chance encounter because Walter Neff is going there to meet her husband, but he's not home. So Walter Neff finds himself in the home of Phyllis Dietrichson. As audiences come to learn as the narrative progresses, she's a controlling individual, and he eventually gets caught in her web. It ultimately seals his fate. In Sunset Boulevard, you've got Joe Gillis. By chance, he steps foot on Norma Desmond's property. He's trying to evade capture, and so all of a sudden he's on her property. Again, it is unexpected. You're watching the film for the first time. It is unexpected. Again, like Double Indemnity, you have this chance encounter. So for both men, for Walter Neff of Double Indemnity and Joe Gillis of Sunset Boulevard, these chance encounters with strange women ultimately seal their fate. It's unsurprising. It's unsurprising in the grand scheme of things because the femme fatale is
Yeah,
a key element of film noir. So,
right. Yeah, that's a good point because, it's interesting because Sunset Boulevard is one of those movies that, not everybody considers a film noir. I mean, I certainly do. And I know Eddie Muller does from Noir Alley, the
yeah,
TCM host. I know he does.
yes,
But because it's, I suppose maybe people feel it's more of anti-Hollywood, and but if you look at like everything you just said, you're absolutely right. Like there's a lot of noir hallmarks that are similar to Double Indemnity. I never really put the two together, so I was glad that you brought that up. And then you also mentioned with Witness of the Prosecution, which I just watched again the other night. I'd only seen it once before, about a decade ago. Really, really enjoyed it.
yeah,
And you mentioned that also the connection there is older women falling for much younger men, which we saw
yeah,
in Sunset Boulevard with Gloria Swanson and the Holden's characters. And we see that in Witness for the Prosecution with I'm forgetting the actor's name who was the guy who was the on trial.
Oh, Tyrone Power. Yeah.
Tyrone Power
Yeah.
and the woman that falls for him. That, spoiler alert, I will say it, even though it's a very it's a very plot heavy film. Is that, we find out at the end that he does kill her for the inheritance, which of course is like a noirish. Not It's not a film noir, but it has noir elements. And it's interesting because it never dawned on me. Not only that, but Dietrich was also a number of years older than Tyrone Power. As I was watching it, because Dietrich looked much younger, actually they look like they're about the same age anyways. I thought maybe they were just gonna make the character a younger character because she looked younger. But then at the end, the woman that he was going to run away with and screw Dietrich's character over, she says to her, "Oh, you're years older than him, anyways." And I was like, "Oh, so that was also a part of it," which so fascinating. I just never put these things together. That's
Yeah.
such and you interviewed her as well, right? You
Yes,
had
I
mentioned,
did. She was great.
yeah,
Yes, really.
she's she's actually Canadian. I didn't know much about her because I really liked her in the movie, and I looked her up, and she's Canadian, and so yeah,
Yeah.
really really good observations. What are some favorite Wilder films of yours?
So, um, I would have to say The Front Page, just because that was the first film I had seen. It had left such a positive impression on me. Also, because of the connection I was able to make with Austin Pendleton, after all of those years. Another favorite, and people are always surprised by this, but another favorite for me would be The Spirit of St. Louis.
Mm,
I feel as if it's overlooked. It's often overlooked, but not only
really
does,
good.
yeah, oh, you've seen it. Excellent.
Again, as I was reading the book, I wanted to watch the films I hadn't seen. I didn't get through everything. Front Page, I still have to see. I didn't see it yet, but that I saw, and I thought it was really really good. I agree with you.
It's overlooked, I think. Not only does The Spirit of St. Louis present this fascinating perspective of Charles Lindbergh's transatlantic flight, but uh, what many people, I think, don't realize is that it was one of the most challenging films that Billy Wilder ever directed. It was shot in Warner Color, but it took 7 months. The production took 7 months, and they were in the United States, they were in Canada, they were in Greenland,
Mm.
they were in France, they were in Ireland, they were in Spain. So, it was a great challenge for him, and the end result was beyond satisfactory. I loved it. So,
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And what I love about Wilder is, like I mentioned, his blend of humor and drama, which often feels so organic. Obviously in some films he does it better than others. But in that film, that's probably more on much a more serious film. But there is some humor in it, particularly right before he is about to take off in that plane, which there's a chance that he will not be able to make it. Other people have tried and died. There's that chance that he may die, and everyone's saying their goodbyes. It's very, very serious. And then Stewart suddenly just, breaks the tension with, "Well, I guess I'll be going." And I just burst out laughing, particularly in the way in that voice of his. I just thought, man, the timing and just the way the tension was broken there. And it's
yeah.
not that he was trying to make anyone laugh. It was just the timing of it and the delivery.
Yeah.
I thought it was spot on. So yeah, I really really enjoyed that one as well. The peer. What do you have a pre? Can you talk a little bit about some differences between his time with Brackett and then his time with I always get this wrong, I.A.L. Diamond. Is there some differences in the content for you in those two periods with his movies?
Well, I think so. I think so. For starters, a more cynical style, I think, becomes evident as you begin to look at those films that Wilder co-wrote with Is Diamond. I think also, if you take a look at romantic relationships, romantic relationships between the narrative's main characters, I think they take a more serious approach. By way of illustration, if you take a look at Bluebeard's Eighth Wife, that's a script that Wilder co-wrote with Charles Brackett. So the relationship between Gary Cooper and Claudette Colbert's characters, it's kind of comical. But then when you take a look at the relationship between C.C. Baxter and Fran Kulik of The Apartment, you can just see those differences right away. The relationship is much more serious, I believe.
Mm,
But another thing I think of, though, is as you begin to take a look at Wilder's later films, when he started to partner with Is Diamond, is the element of humor.
right. Much
Billy
more
Wilder,
so.
yeah, um, Billy Wilder and Is Diamond. I think they're responsible for creating one of the greatest comedic partnerships in cinematic history, and I'm talking about Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. Everything
Yes.
started with the fortune cookie.
Right.
Uh, that was their first pairing, the fortune cookie, and you know what happened with that pairing. It just took off from there. So yeah.
I also felt that he brought out Wilder's raunchier side,
Mm.
because the films, sex is such a big part of so many of those films as well. So yeah, because
Yeah.
in the earlier the stuff he did with Brackett were much more, to me, much more serious.
Right.
And like you said, like with like Diamond, he hit this that blend of drama and comedy, and there was just it to me, or I mean, I love both periods. But there's one thing that really stood out to me. I actually recently interviewed Joseph McBride,
Oh yeah.
who wrote a book on Wilder that came out in the last few years, and he knew Wilder, and he apparently had asked Wilder what is the best film you made, and apparently Wilder felt it was The Apartment, because he
Yeah.
felt that he captured drama, the mix of drama and comedy, the best in that film. And I'd have to, I don't know if I've thought deeply enough whether, to me, that's his best film, but it's certainly one of the best. I think,
Right.
to me, The
Right.
Apartment, I watched it, I showed it to my wife recently because she hadn't seen it before, and
Okay.
it was such a delight to see someone see it for the first time.
Right.
And for so many reasons, particularly at the end, when she's running up the stairs and you hear the cork, the bottle, the corkscrew from the bottle pop up, and she thinks it's a gun, that he killed himself. We think it's a we think he killed himself, and of course when she knocks, it's the champagne, and just like the reaction from my wife, and then the relief when it's just the champagne, moments like that. But to me, that film is so brilliant because it's, at the end of the day, these two people really are really insecure. They let people walk all over them. They don't really think much of their own abilities. I mean, that's, to me, was partly why Lemon's character was, Mr. Baxter there, why he was allowing people to take advantage of him so much, because I felt he didn't really believe he can climb the ladder of success that he wanted if he didn't bend to these people. And then if you look at Miss Kubelik there, as she says, she wasn't doing great in school, and so she became this elevator operator, and she's had some troubled relationships, and so she perhaps doesn't feel like anyone could truly love her, and so she allows these affairs that are not going to go anywhere. And I just thought, there's a lot of really serious moments, but then we still have these great gags, and farcical moments and situational moments and comedic timing. I think he may be right there. I don't know how you feel about that. Whether that's maybe the best thing he did. Hard to say.
I would have to say it is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's where he reached the pinnacle of his career. When he was
yeah.
receiving the Academy Awards, Moss Hart, he was on stage receiving the second of his third Academy Awards for The Apartment. And Moss Hart whispered into his ear, "Billy, it's time to stop."
Right,
So,
right. And he didn't. And it's interesting because his period after that, the work perhaps is not as good as everything from The Apartment and before.
right.
Um, you know, generally speaking. But there are still some, like we mentioned, Fedora. I just watched Kiss Me Stupid again recently. That was another one I saw about a decade ago. I was surprised that in your book you mentioned that he didn't like it, because I thought that was a great. I thought that was a great film. I was curious what you felt about that one.
Yeah, so it was he actually adapted that from a play.
Yeah.
Speaking of plays, it was an Italian play called The Dazzling Hour. But I think the film was kind of doomed from the beginning, just because he wanted Jack Lemmon.
That would have been so much better if he had Lemon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because Felicia Farr plays a significant role in that film, and so he wanted that husband and wife on screen pairing, and it didn't
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have made a difference. I like, well, what's the actor's name who got that part?
So Ray Walston,
That's it. Yeah.
yeah,
Like, he's funny, he's quite good, but he's not Lemon. I mean, Lemon
right,
was one of the
yeah,
but I still quite liked it. I thought everyone, Kim Novak, I thought Dean Martin. I mean, wow. I mean, he was playing basically he's playing a version of himself, but I thought
absolutely,
he was really, 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 really good.
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on some other actually, before I touch on that, I wanted to ask, there was a quote that I thought was interesting here, where he talks about, he told, people, screenwriters or aspiring screenwriters, to be careful not to describe what the audiences see, to add to it. Can you maybe give an example of what he may have meant there?
So it all goes back to his time with Ernst Lubitsch. Now, Wilder was a great admirer of Ernst Lubitsch even before the two met. Wilder had seen some of the man's films and became inspired. And their first collaboration was Bluebeard's Eighth Wife.
Right.
Lubitsch was the director. Wilder and Brackett were the screenwriters. And so, with the script, Lubitsch had granted both men a considerable degree of autonomy. As a result, Wilder learned a lot in the process. But one thing that Ernst Lubitsch told Wilder, he said, let the audience add up 2 plus 2. They'll love you. They'll love you forever.
Right.
And so a lot of directors, not a lot, but a handful of directors, I think they make the mistake of misjudging the intelligence level of their audiences, and
Right.
as a result, it's like they reveal too much. But not Wilder. He didn't fall into that trap, and it just goes back to that influence that Ernst Lubitsch had on him.
Well, he had that plaque in his office, right? Those, what would
Yeah,
Lubitsch do? I think it
yeah.
said.
How would Lubitsch do it? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I still have to watch that one. Bluebeard's Wife? Is that what it's called?
So it's Bluebeard's Eighth Wife.
Eighth
Yes.
Wife. Sorry. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. That's another one on my watch list. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that Brackett and Wilder stopped working together. So you write here in the book, Wilder stated in a 1996 interview with the Paris Review, it's like a box of matches. You pick up the match and strike it against the box, and there's always fire. But then one day there is just one small corner of that abrasive paper left for you to strike the match on, and it was not there anymore. It's interesting because I was talking, Joseph McBride mentioned to me that apparently, in Brackett's diaries that were published, he said it had to do with the they clashed over the blacklisting of the day. I don't do. Would you happen to know much about that?
So yeah, so if you look at Brackett's diaries, there are some clues. There are some clues. These diaries were edited by Anthony Slide, film historian Anthony Slide, and you can actually purchase a copy. If you
Yeah,
look for the title, it's "The Pictures That Got Small."
yeah.
Uh,
Which I just noticed that earlier.
yeah, it was a clear reference to Sunset Boulevard. I believe the diaries cover the time between 1932 and 1949. Wilder and Brackett stopped working during the production of Sunset Boulevard, which was released in 1950. So I believe they are going to publish the remainder of the diaries at some point. But Brackett's right-wing views, they very much could have caused a rift
Right.
between him and Wilder.
Hmm.
So personally, these disagreements, yeah, they could have played a part in the dissolution of their partnership. Maybe it's conjecture, I don't know. But yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
So he didn't definitively say in the book, this is why we stopped. And because of the blacklist, he just sort of suggested it.
correct. Yeah,
Okay, I'll have to read that. I'll have to read that one day. Well, yeah, because I heard that they always had a troubled relationship. So, I don't know a lot about it, but I'll have to read the diaries and the biography you mentioned on Wilder as well.
yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, I watched some films of Wilder that I hadn't seen. One of the ones I want to bring up, which I thought was was really good. And so this is one thing about Wilder is his audaciousness is major and the minor, which I thought was so wonderful. And as he said, it's like a light Lolita.
Right.
What do you think of that one?
So it's a commercial film, you
Yeah,
know. Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett, they were at a point where uh, film directors were not necessarily being true to the scripts they had
right,
written, and so Paramount executives they would have preferred if Billy Wilder had remained a writer, um, but he really wanted to direct an A-list film, a commercial film, and so um, they actually gave him an opportunity to direct a film, but they believed that it would have been, it would have been a disaster. That he would have directed this film. It would have been released to the American public. It would have been, just thrashed upon by the critics, and so branded a failure. He'd essentially have no choice but to rejoin the writing department upon the project's
mm,
completion. So Wilder was confident, and so when he went into that project of directing the major and the minor, he sought to avoid any traps that were set by the very executives who had expected him to fail. But the final piece of the puzzle, I think, made that picture a success, and I'm talking about Ginger Rogers.
mm,
Ginger Rogers had just won an Oscar for Kitty Foyle. So she read Wilder's script, and she agreed to play the lead. And so, unsurprisingly, because all of a sudden Ginger Rogers is attached to this project, the film is suddenly predicted to be a commercial success.
right.
So Billy Wilder, he had a chance to, cut his teeth, for lack of a better phrase, making his debut with this A picture. Did he enjoy it? Probably not. Probably not. But I see it as like, if some people think of the major and the minor as a failure, um, I think it's a qualified failure. It got him on the map, and after that, he directed Five Graves to Cairo, which is a little bit better than the
Yeah.
major and the minor. And then after that, of course, was Double Indemnity. The critics were positive when the major and the minor came out. Bosley Crowther, the famous Bosley Crowther of the New York Times. Yeah, he said, I think something to the effect of, "Well, there are two fast boys with a script," referring to Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett, saying that they're, sly boys, they are. And but I think his comments were generally positive.
Hmm.
There's a scene between Ginger Rogers and Ray Milland where they're in a Pullman car on a train, and they're kind of intimate. And Bosley Crowther is like, hey, the Hayes office actually permitted this to happen. So
I was
kudos.
surprised. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was surprised too. Well, it's so that I didn't. I thought it was really good. I didn't think it was a great film, but I thought there's a lot in it that I really admired. And again, the audaciousness, because Ray Milland is attracted to Ginger Rogers, and yeah, she's a grown woman, but she's posing as like a 12-year-old girl, right? So from his point of view, she's a kid, right? So
right,
he is.
right.
It does have that Lolita Lolita quality of being attracted to a minor, even though, of course, the what we find out is that at the he finds out, and we know the whole time he finds out at the end that she's an adult, and I just thought, wow, that was so audacious, to have explored that. And one thing that popped out to me, just having watched a number of the films recently, or rewatching some, was this element of role playing in a number of his films. Like you see Ginger Roger in that film. She's tricking everyone, pretending to be a young girl in order to get half price to get on the train because she's just out of money and it's a cheaper ticket for kids. And then she gets into the situation. And we see the same thing in Some Like It Hot, where, of course, these guys dressing in drag, pretending to be women in order to run away from these gangsters. And play with this all female musicians. Irma La Duce has that, of course, with Lemon pretending to be someone else so he could stop Shirley MacLaine's character from continuing to be a prostitute. Kiss Me Stupid, with Kim Novak, they're pretending to be his wife when she's really a prostitute. I thought that's so interesting.
Yep.
This element of role playing. Was that something that stood out to you?
Not particularly, but I mean, I think you just made a great connection right there. It is ironic how, yeah,
Yeah.
the people that I've spoken with, whenever we talk about Billy Wilder, they tend to speak negatively of Irma La Douce and Kiss Me Stupid, with two films that are actually back to back. But yeah, I think they're entertaining. I think they're worth watching. Just to put my 2 cents in there.
Yeah, I just saw Irma La Duce for the first time recently, and I liked it, but I agree it's entertaining. It's not a great film. It doesn't have that substance that something like The Apartment had. But it is much more of the situational farcical things that he's great at, but lacking that real truthful character exploration that I felt. And like I said, I'm a defender of Kiss Me Stupid because I think just everything that he's saying about how, like, silly men can be with the jealousies and insecurities, and really that all of this stuff happens because the guy is so insecure and jealous, and the ironies that play out, he could have avoided all of this if he just was more trustworthy and confident and things like that. So I did really, really enjoy those as well. And just lastly, the other one I hadn't seen, speaking of Dietrich, A Foreign Affair, and I've been meaning to see it. Really great film that I don't think people talk much about. What's your opinion on that one?
Oh, I think that's a classic, sometimes forgotten film. Yeah. And I actually should have brought that when you asked me which of my favorite Wilder films, which films of Wilder's are my favorite. I should have mentioned A Foreign Affair because that's definitely right up there.
Mm,
It's yeah, you've got Marlene Dietrich, you've got Jean Arthur. It's an interesting combination. Jean Arthur plays a congresswoman, Phoebe Frost. It's kind of uptight, but as the love story progresses, you begin to see gradual changes in her character. But yeah, John Lund.
yeah.
John Lund was an up and coming performer at the time. He plays the male protagonist of A Foreign Affair, and it was actually Charles Brackett's idea to cast John Lund. So Wilder agreed, but I think Wilder was more intent on getting Jean Arthur and Marlene Dietrich together, just to see how those
Hmm.
those two female leads would clash on screen. But
Right.
John Lund was great too. So
I thought so. Yeah, I thought so too. And again, quite audacious of him so soon after the war to have portrayed, well, first of all, the German people in, that we see the ruins of Berlin. Like, he went
yes,
there and shot it. Reminds me of The Lost Weekend, shooting in New York on the street. And it cast a more sympathetic light on what was happening in Germany then. When I imagine, at that time, because of the Nazis, people didn't want to really give much sympathy. I mean, I don't know for sure what the world was thinking, in terms of their sympathy towards Germany at that time. But then on top of that, to have had Dietrich play a Nazi mistress, again, pretty audacious, because she's portrayed as being not really a Nazi, but someone who was an opportunist and compromised in order to survive. So she was a mistress for the Nazis, and then even with with John Lund's character, so she's just doing what she needs to do to survive. And you really didn't see those kind of complex portrayals of the war, and people doing that all over Europe in order to survive, and they people collaborated with the Nazis. They did, not everybody, but it did happen. And you didn't really see that till much later in like European art house films, like those more complicated portrayals. And I thought, wow, I mean, again, Wilder's ahead of his time as always by doing something like that. But I thought that was great. Hopefully I should review that one day, because hopefully more people will see it. Yeah. But yeah, again, a really, really wonderful, wonderful book. And I appreciate that you thanked me in the acknowledgments. It was such an honor.
Of course. Well, you were actually instrumental, during when I was looking for people to contribute blurbs. You were one of the first people I reached out to, and you were able to provide the names of fellow authors, people I could check in with. So I do appreciate that. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and thanks for sending me a copy. Where's the best place for people to get it?
Probably Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Those are the best online sources. Yeah.
Okay, great. He even inspired me to dress like him today, because I like the hat and the, the sweater and the white dress shirt. Nice. Yeah, I just love the man. So what a great exploration of his films with one of the great Hollywood filmmakers, certainly. If people are you a big social media person? Can people follow you anywhere, or do you have a website?
No, I'm not a social media person.
Okay. All right. So they would just I'll drop the link where people can get it. They can get it on the Bear Manor Media's website too, the publisher, I believe, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yes. Great. So I'll leave the link in the description box to bearmanormedia.com, where you can get the book there as well. Well, Joe, thank you so much again for your time. I really enjoyed it, and come back hopefully not in 2 years, hopefully much sooner, and we'll do a deep dive into one of Wilder's films, maybe.
That would be great. I would love that. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that I create month in and month out. And as a subscriber, you are able to vote on polls and contribute to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on the thanks link and you can leave a donation there if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner. To your top left, in just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Also click the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this episode. Also, you can also share the episode. All of these things are what produce traction to my YouTube channel. So I appreciate you watching, and thank you again, and I will see you in the next episode.